Good evening. My name is Stephanie Locke, and I am the Development and Communications Manager at 21 Progress. 21 Progress is a nonprofit based in Seattle, Washington, focused on developing the next generation of leaders in our community. We do that in a variety of ways, including one-on-one mentorship, college and career navigation, community education, and civic advocacy, where we make sure that the voices heard in the media are the voices of the people most impacted by issues of immigration, economic justice, and social change. Fundamentally, 21 Progress believes that if we want anything to change, it will require a different kind of leader. Leaders who believe in creativity, courage, and making sure everyone has access to dignity at work and at home. This is the third event out of 4 events for our new fall series. We have another series called Rise, where we bring together community leaders in the spirit of how do we create more mornings where we can wake up together as a community. And the first thing we see or read is not more bad news. As Mozart likes to say, this is a remix of that, where we come together in the evening after a long day's work to have conversation with leaders in our community who want to talk about how do we shape our region, what will it look like in the next 5 years, 10 years, in terms of who will be in seats of power, and how will we make sure those folks reflect the values most important to the people who are here in this room tonight and the people we care most about. This series is filmed by Ambassador Stories, a community-based organization that has done incredible work in the community as it relates to communities of color and their stories. We also believe that by in partnership with Ambassador Stories and speakers that will be featured over the next few weeks, that through storytelling, that's one way we can start to change history. And by changing history, we can actually change the future. This project is funded by the Neighborhood Matching Fund, and we're so grateful for their support and to each of you for joining us here tonight. We hope you enjoy this experience. May it inspire you to take action, whether it is volunteering, voting if you are able to, engaging with friends and family over the dinner table, and taking time to share your own lived experiences so that we can truly build together. Our first speaker is Jerrell Davis, aka Rel Be Free, is a proud product of the South End who brings creative artistry and radical activism together through the arts, education, and community organizing. Jerrell is a founding member of Washington Building Leaders of Change, WALBLOC, which serves out of Rainier Beach High School, working with scholars, teachers, and administration in a number of transformative capacities, such as running the summer program CDF Freedom Schools, implementing restorative justice, and influencing campus culture. Jerrell is a coordinator of an innovative, youth-centered, autonomous community safety project with the Rainier Beach Action Coalition called the Corner Greeters. Jerrell is also one of the founding core members of the politically groundbreaking Seattle People's Party. Within the arts, Jerrell, as Rel Be Free, is a prolific musician and poet whose work is available on all major platforms, including Spotify and Tidal. So with that, please help me welcome Jerrell.
Hey y'all, what's up? Good to see y'all. I'm blessed to be here. I gotta acknowledge my family who's here right now. And I know I'm being tasked with telling my leadership story. They call me Rel Be Free. Let me hear y'all say Rel Be Free.
Rel Be Free.
And that is actually something that I named myself as an affirmation. Before I go on stage, I tell myself Rel Be Free. And that's something that I really encourage people to be free, to be themselves. I'm somebody that's been working with young people since I was a young person. I recall teaching Sunday school classes as a 13-year-old with my mom at Sunday school, and being free is something that I definitely identify with. It's also a homonym with will be free. And if you know me very well, you know I've always had somewhat of a speech impediment. You know, them R's and W's kind of feel like the same letter sometimes. And so when you say Rel Be Free, if this was the 6-year-old me saying Rel Be Free, I'd actually be saying will be free. And that's something that I also want to just advocate for and lift up. Shout out to my mother, Sean Davis, who's in the house right now. I gotta clap it up for her. To talk about my leadership story, it's going to be very embedded with my family members, and the core and backbone of who I've become is definitely in the room right now. I'll be standing up here and sitting up here interviewing with my father, Gregory Davis, who I'm a little version of him, as well as my sister Kyla, who was my first role model outside of my parents and my first best friend. And so I really want to tell this story of my leadership kind of chronologically. I'm 26. So my leadership story, like, it's kind of wide, but I haven't really been doing a lot. I'm 26. Granted, I've done a lot in my 26 years. I really want to elevate the different educational spaces that I've been in. And I have to think about Zion Prep Academy as probably the official formal beginning of my leadership process. Being in an institution that was Black run, Black founded, and Black led, being surrounded by Black people and other Black students from kindergarten all the way to 5th grade. And definitely I was a part of some great preschool programs as well. Can't remember the names because it was long ago, but Zion Prep was where it begun. And I really got to shout out Zion Prep because it no longer exists as an entity. The space where I grew up going to elementary school is now a place where a bunch of gentrifying families are raising their children off the corner of 34th and Columbia Way in South Seattle. And Zion Prep was really a great opportunity for me to be told that I can be free, that I can be who I was in the classroom. Definitely had a spiritual backbone and a faith-based element in our education that I think was very encouraging for me as I transitioned throughout my educational career. And going from Zion Prep to Aki Kurosi, which was my first experience in public school. Aki Kurosi is a school in the South End off of Graham Street that is, if you talk about middle schools in Seattle, Aki has a bad rep. They would always say that this is where the hood kids go. Even still today, that's something that is told about Aki Kurosi. A lot of 5th graders don't want to go to Aki. And it's the ones that do want to go for the rep of going to Aki Kurosi. And I actually remember the day that we went to what is now a space that's considered the Umoja Peace Center, the Africa Town Center for Education and Innovation, and we signed up for me to go to Aki Kurosi instead of Mercer Middle School, which is actually in closer proximity to the house I grew up on Beacon Hill. And Aki Kurosi was a place where I really began to come into my own. I was challenged with knowing who I was in an environment that was definitely, it was different than what was like in my household. I've always been one of few friends amongst my friend groups that have had a very strong nucleus inside the household. And so my family was actually an example to a lot of my friends who did not have 2 parents in the home, that did not live in the same house for their entire life, that did not have the stability and receive the same kind of love that I knew I would receive and I could count on receiving every day. And that was something that when you're growing up in a certain community like that, where it's almost looked down upon, you start to question that and you almost like want to be hood, you know what I'm saying? And this is an identity crisis that probably all Black men can identify with to some extent, whether you grow up in the suburbs or not. And I remember going through middle school, seeing my friends starting to get exposed to things that I knew I wasn't supposed to be getting exposed to, but that was what I was seeing, that was going on. Fights after school, but me still getting my homework done. I remember it must have been 7th or 8th grade. I might have got a 3.1, and I came home and I cried. I was mad, y'all, because I was not used to that. I'm out here 3.8, 3.9. And not even being an overachiever for the sake of achievement, but because one, my parents did expect that of me, but I can't recall a time in my life where they were like, I feared punishment for not being successful. If anything, it was, Jerrell, you can do this. Jerrell, you can be what you want to be. And that affirmation for a young person growing up in South Seattle made a world of difference. And so growing up, Zion Prep, Aki Kurosi, and then making this transition from Aki Kurosi in public school to O'Day High School, a predominantly white, Catholic, all boys, probably 3 things I didn't really want to be around. Going into high school, making that transition was a culture shock that actually a lot of folk that grow up in inner cities they have that transition and that experience when they go to college. They have that culture shock. I had that culture shock at 14. And I always still wonder, and I don't know, I think I've asked them straight up, I don't remember what their answer was, if they did that on purpose. Because when you look at it on paper, you're like, they was working on something, you know? And I even wonder if I had been so rooted in my culture and my identity, would that have been a safe and healthy transition for me? Going from not having a white kid in my classes until I was in 8th grade to making the jump next year and being one of maybe 3 black kids in my freshman classes. And being at O'Day and starting to feel the chance to be tokenized and not really being able to put language to what that experience was, but to know the feeling of, how come every time we talk about black history, they want to call me out? How come I'm always ending up in the dean's office for challenging the authority for what I know to be true? How come that teacher gets to say that? No, that's not cool. How come that coach gets to say that? How come we call the Fighting Irish and it's a team full of black people? This don't make no sense. I don't like this. And it was these paradoxes and these experiences that I was really feeling and wrestling with as a teenager, not with full language to articulate it. And I have to elevate the experience of being a part of a group called Empire Nights during my high school career, where we created an open mic and a performance space for young people in South Seattle, knowing that a lot of the open mic and hip hop communities were, 21 plus, 18 plus, closed off. We wanted to create a space where young folk in the South End especially could come and express themselves. And that's probably where my first exposure to really diving in to poetry and the arts. I always remember hearing my sister singing in her room and creeping up by her door or creeping up by her window to hear her sing, and knowing that she was a beautiful poet. She's probably my first poetry and rap teacher. I remember I would come to her with a couple of, I remember in like elementary school, I'd come to her with these like really bad, really whack rhymes, but she would affirm them. Jam Master Jay, we'll see you one day. Things like that I brought to her, and she affirmed it. And she wasn't like, oh, that's corny, Rel, like, get out of my face. She was like, yeah, keep doing your thing, and just that association with being affirmed and me being myself as I transitioned through these, you could say turbulent in regards to no matter what experience you grow up in, you have to find yourself. Whether you're being loved on your whole life, you still have to learn how to love yourself, or whether you're being the opposite. And so transitioning from O'Day and really being proud to be from South Seattle was something that I really started to formalize. Leaving South Seattle, leaving Beacon Hill and Rainier Valley, and my friends that I grew up with in the neighborhood, and going to O'Day and like meeting these kids that like were trying to be hood. And I was like, actually, bro, like I know cats that are really doing this. I don't think you're about that. Really affirming myself, and I don't have to try to be that. I don't have to be this image of what you think a black man is supposed to be. Because in fact, I'm cool, and I'm smarter than you, and I'll beat you in chess, and I'll hoop you. What? Trifecta, fourfecta, quadrifecta, whatever, mathematics. Transitioning from O'Day and knowing that college was always an option for me. I don't think growing up I always thought about college. I wasn't like in 8th grade like, oh, I wonder what college I'm gonna go to. I don't think I was thinking that. I had other things on my mind. But probably being 17 and recognizing that I wasn't gonna go to the NBA, because that was for a very long time. I was like, I'm going to the NBA, y'all. I'm gonna play for the Lakers. I'm gonna beat Kobe's record, and yeah, that's gonna be the end of life. Being 17 and looking up at the stars and it just hitting me and being like, you're probably not going to the NBA, bro. Oh, okay. It was hard because, you had your whole life set around that. But like I said, being affirmed, I think that's going to be a thread of my leadership story. And I was actually with a group of young folk yesterday, and they asked a question of this artist who's going to be doing an installation in Lake Ridge Park. And he said from the beginning he had a vision to be in architecture, and he transitioned that into art. And he incorporates his architectural degree into his art. And somebody asked him, like, how did you not think about people hating on you? And he was like, I just didn't look at them. I didn't really have haters. I had affirmation. And that's mindset. And so going from O'Day to Seattle Pacific University, which was basically O'Day with girls, and a few more people. That was really where I was able to put language to my experience of growing up. I majored in sociology and business economics, and from the time I applied to college to the time I got my degree, that was my major. I set out to be a sociology major with business economics as my secondary degree, and that's what I got. I said I'm going to graduate in 4 years because I'm not trying to pay for more. I played basketball for a couple of years and had to transition from that being a way to keep paying for my tuition as well as scholarships and help from my parents to really investing in my art. And upon graduating from SPU in 2014, I took it upon myself under the leadership of my sister who lived in Japan for 2 years while I was still in high school. She really showed me it was possible to do that. And so I left and I went back to Guatemala, of which I did a study abroad. I went by myself and I was there for about 4 months. Upon returning, it was when I really got immersed in organizing in Seattle and really putting my energy towards my neighborhood and my city. And from that came my participation in organizations like the Rainier Beach Action Coalition and coordinating corner greeters and creating organizations like Washington Building Leaders of Change and really putting in work in Rainier Beach High School. That came from that is creating, being a part of the group that created Seattle People's Party, who ran my good friend and sister Nikita Oliver for mayor and changed the dynamics of how grassroots organizing looks, not just in this city, nationally, internationally. And I'm going to continue to do those things. And so I have to give all honor and glory and praise to God because I don't think any of this stuff I planned for my life to be, but definitely I feel a hand that has been guiding me and protecting me because there were times where I didn't have to be here and I didn't have to make it through. And so I would definitely want to express appreciation to my parents, my family. Affirmation, love, and elevation is definitely a part of my story, and I'm appreciating being here. And so with that, you know, y'all gonna hear from my pops, and let me know if you hear any similar stories from him. Thank y'all for listening.
Thanks, Jerrell. Next, we have Gregory Davis. And I should say Gregory, not Greg, to get that right. Gregory is a veteran neighborhood development practitioner, 30 plus years, and diplomatic poised observer. Gregory manages strategy for the Rainier Beach Action Coalition. He delivers youth and neighborhood engagement programming and technical assistance to community coalitions, community development practitioners, and municipal governments. Gregory has been on the scene in Rainier Beach since 2001 when he served as executive director for Emerald City Outreach Ministries, now Urban Impact. In the 90s, Gregory served as chair of the Central Area Neighborhood Plan Development Committee, which led to a 6-year stint as a planning commission for the city of Seattle. Gregory is also the principal for Kismet Strategies, LLC, whose tagline is, helping those we assist reach their destiny. He declares improving the lives of societies most vulnerable as a driving force for him personally and professionally. Gregory has been married to his college sweetheart, Sean Richard Davis, for 33 years, who is in this room today, so shout out there, and is father of Jerrell and Kyla Nsimbi. He hails from Compton, California, and has been a Seattle resident since 1985. He loves sports, especially track and basketball, music, the arts, gardening, and supporting young people's aspirations through mentoring. And so with that, please help me welcome Gregory. And really want to acknowledge the last part where we get to share who people are as whole people, and really excited to hear his story.
Much respect to everyone here. I'd like to thank Marissa, Stephanie, and Mozart for the invitation. It was really an honor, particularly when I think about the goals that 21 Progress has. When I read the kind of the byline, advocating for justice, equity, safety, all people, and neighborhoods, that seemed to strike a chord with me, and so really appreciate the invitation. Excited about talking about my personal leadership journey. One of the things that I will say, and maybe I'll just give away the plot to this whole thing at the beginning, is that when we think about leadership journeys, it's everything, isn't it? It's not really one particular thing that occurs to us. So what I want to do, similar to what Jerrell did, was just provide a chronological history, or I'll say chronological occurrences of critical activity that happened. So even though I might say one thing, and it's always a story associated with it. So one of the things that I'll say is I grew up in Compton, California. You heard about that as part of my introduction, from 1960 to 1978. So as a young person and a teenager. One of the things I will say about Compton, California is the things that you hear about it, yeah, they were all true. And so when you look at me and look at my position in life now and say, well, I'm wondering if he was a tough guy. Yes, I was a tough guy. But one of the things that I was able to do was to have a grounding from my parents in faith and also a grounding in culture. And what that did was allow me to move forward and beyond what that particular scene was. I do want to say, though, that when you think about Compton, yeah, there was a lot of gangs, but there were a few folks who predated the gangs that created that situation. I want to talk about, mention the police, and I also want to talk about institutions. Firestone and Goodyear were large corporations in that neighborhood, and they wound up moving out. And what that did was precipitated this situation where people really had to struggle, really had to try to strive beyond their means. And that's just something that kind of created this Compton reality that we've come to know. I grew up in Compton. I was 5-year-old during the Watts, what is referred to as the Watts riots. We refer to them as the Watts Rebellion. I have an interesting story about that in terms of a critical occurrence in regard to my father, and I'll get to that in just a minute. 4th grade, monumental time. I learned how to do an agenda. They was in trouble after that. Imagine a 9-year-old able to do an agenda. Everywhere I went, I was able to have an agenda. And that's what really created the impact that I was able to have in terms of leadership. Great athlete, you know, some people say very good athlete. I like to say great athlete. And that was one of the things that also helped me weave through the close calls that occurred in Compton. One of the things, as tough and rough and tumble as the location as that was, they had understanding when they saw somebody with promise and somebody with potential. They allowed young people to have passes and to go through particular territories untouched because they knew about the promise that they had. And so my being involved in athletics was one of the reasons that that happened for me. Wound up being associated student body officer in the 6th grade. Had the same opportunity happen in the 12th grade. One of the things that one of my friends came up with a campaign slogan in the 6th grade, and if you can imagine a 6th grader having this as a campaign slogan, one of those critical occurrences, the campaign slogan was, Gregory Davis will save us. Imagine that. That's one of the lessons, though, that I've learned as a leader. You got to be able to back up what you say. One of my campaign promises was that I was going to allow bigger lunches to happen. You know, the young people there was like, the lunches is not big enough. We don't get enough food. So as it turns out, we got bigger lunches. But then what happened? They didn't eat them. So in terms of a lesson, that was one thing that I've learned that's really, really critical. Went to a small parochial high school, South Central Los Angeles, nestled up against the projects, Nickerson Gardens. And that was a really situation that was really challenging because any day could happen where folks could just kind of have a bad day, come out and jump you. You kind of will hear gunshots through the course of that time. But for the grace of God, I was able to get through that. Wound up leaving Seattle, leaving Bourbon Day, that's the name of the high school, to go to Seattle University. participated in the basketball team at Urban Day High School. Our basketball team was ranked #1 in the nation my senior year, and we got put on the map. And so that's why Seattle University came to this small parochial high school in South Central Los Angeles. Wound up being a part of the Black Student Union. Entered the School of Engineering, didn't quite have my academics together, and so wound up changing majors and got into social sciences and political science and economics. And that's what created my pathway to the Black Student Union. A couple of contemporaries in Seattle today that I am still friends with, Pastor Zachary Bruce, who's a pastor at Freedom Church, Kalfani Mwamba, who is a chemical dependency counselor at the University of Washington and instructor there, are people that I met that were instrumental in my leadership outlook during my college years. Early jobs, worked for Junior Achievement, worked for Center for Career Alternatives, worked for Central Area Motivation Program, which is right now called Bird Bar. Worked at Central Area Motivation Program, and also worked at Casey Family Programs. All of these things led to these critical occurrences happening. Some of the people that I was able to interact through those particular opportunities was Alan Sugiyama, one of the really important leader in employment in this city. Rest in peace, Al. Larry Gossett at Central Air Motivation Program was one of my contemporaries, one of the folks that I looked up to. And of course, Harvey Drake at Emerald City Outreach Ministries, or Urban Impact now. One of the things I wanted to share about my leadership journey was the bizarre way that I became a leader. I was at Central Area Motivation Program doing youth leadership development in a program called Rite of Passage. I was also doing organizational management, supporting the development of the Central Area Motivation Program. And Norm Rice was in office, and he was interested in moving the needle in the city of Seattle on jobs and on housing. So he wanted to have neighborhoods create their own neighborhood plans. There are 37 neighborhoods in Seattle. He reorganized the city of Seattle to have interdepartmental teams so that they can focus on the particular neighborhoods and what they were desiring to help improve this housing and job growth that he had. So they came to camp. Naturally, camp was one of the stalwart organizations in the central area, and so they came to make a presentation, and I was there. You ever been in one of those situations where once a presentation occurs and people are looking for volunteers and everybody steps back and you don't move, but it makes it look like you stepped forward? That was my situation with that particular opportunity. But it worked out to be very instrumental in my leadership development. I ultimately wound up being chair of the Central Area Neighborhood Plan. Now this was in 1994, 1997, so a good 20 years had to go by before you see what you see now in the central area. So can I take credit for that? Maybe, but a lot of folks don't like what's going on there because of the gentrification. One of the things that we tried to do when we were developing the neighborhood plan in the central areas, we actually added a human development component along with the transportation component, along with the housing component, along with the environment component. And that was how we were trying to control this issue about equity and gentrification back then, is we did see the need and the opportunity for development, but we also wanted to make sure that the people developed along with those development. As it turns out, that particular element of the Central Area Neighborhood Plan really didn't get embraced, and that was really one of the struggles that I had as a leader in that particular time. Frankly, the civil rights organizations didn't pick up on it. The social service organizations didn't pick up on it. And so as a result, the people in the neighborhood were not able to grasp the nuances of the neighborhood plan and to see what was going to be coming down the road and develop themselves so that they could overcome the market conditions in order to be able to stay there. And so that ultimately got me, when I started at Urban Impact, or Emerald City Outreach Ministries, to look at the neighborhood plan, because I was at the Planning Commission at that time. And so that is one of the things that wound up with me being at Rainier Beach Action Coalition. Left Casey Family Programs after 13 years, traveling over the country, providing expertise, expert facilitation, and support for child welfare leaders, and knew that I needed to get into my neighborhood. Saw what happened in Houston, saw communities that were devastated by natural disasters, and thought to myself, wow, if that happens in Rainier Beach, are we going to be ready? Are we going to be ready? So I asked my wife if I could leave. Naturally had to do that, being married to her as long as I did and being the love of my life. And then had to put a little incentive in it, name a company after her, thinking that that was going to help a little bit in the decision, and it did. And so I've been at Rainier Beach Action Coalition as managing strategist for the last year. And we're really excited about what we're doing in the neighborhood. We've developed some acclaim and understand now that our neighborhood plan is on the desk of every city director in the city. So whenever any department wants to come into the neighborhood, they need to pick up the phone and call Rainier Beach Action Coalition and learn about what, through us, the vision for the neighborhood is. And that's something that we're really excited about. So just wanted to again say, much respect to all of the work that you do here at 21 Progress. I'm excited to be in partnership with you and to be part of this particular opportunity. And I hope it is as valuable to you as it is to me. Thank you very much.
Gregory and Jerrell, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing personal leadership stories. I found so much connection personally in each of yours, and so I'm really, really excited for this interview portion. You went chronologically, which I think is great because it sets up this question really well. So given that we're in 2019, Happy New Year, it's January. But in 2019, for each of you, what are the key projects, people, or spaces that you are giving your time to as a leader, and why?
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jerrell, second playing. 2019, there's a number of things because my energies are spread across a number of different organizing efforts, but definitely I will always, and if I'm ever not centering Black folk in Seattle, specifically Black folk in South Seattle, then I'm off kilter. And so I work at Rainier Beach High School. I work with young folk that are in the South End neighborhood, and they will always be my focus. Like I said, I have an organization I started with some friends called Washington Building Leaders of Change, WABLOC, and we do work out of Rainier Beach. And so one of the things that we're really focusing on right now, we have a team that is implementing restorative justice, trauma-informed practices at Rainier Beach High School. And so we're working with the administration, working with teachers, working with students, and building up student circle keepers, as well as training students in what restorative justice is based off the indigenous practice of the Tagish Tlingit people and the indigenous people of this area. Seattle, we know the city is named, and it's romanticized Seattle from Sea-Alf, the chief of the Duwamish Nation. And so this practice of restorative justice is something that has really started to bleed into a lot of the organizing I do, in that I've had the blessing to be trained and in space with a lot of folk that actually brought that practice here. I've had the opportunity to go to Oakland and see it on a full scale in schools. And so my MO is education, and I have a homeschool collective called the Ella Baker Academy for Gifted Revolutionaries, in which currently I have 3 students who I teach on 2 days of the week, and I'm looking to continue that process and develop that to be something that in years to come does have a physical space that will serve African American students. The question is whether it'll be in Seattle or not. We keep getting pushed out. I don't know if it's gonna make sense to be in Seattle anymore. As well as a musician, I got a bunch of music coming soon, and I'm looking forward to releasing that and really continuing to push the envelope, because just as I am when I do speaking engagements or I'm having conversation, I'm definitely somebody that wants to, I want to be the person that says things that everybody's thinking but is afraid to say. Like, I'm very okay with being that person. I have no problem with that. And so musically, sometimes that may get me in trouble with some people I love, but I've embraced that role. And so I'm looking forward to just making music that centers our experience, but at the same time is elevating of my people. And so I'm gonna continue repping for my neighborhood, my city, but as I did in December by going internationally. I went to London in December, and I'm really looking forward to the second half of the year, having the opportunities to continue to expand this platform internationally. And so I'm looking into some opportunities to go abroad again post-September, while sustaining the work that's being done in the neighborhood and really building up succession so that it's not, I don't want to be indispensable. I want to be replicable. I want there to be multiple people that can do what I do, because I do not have founder syndrome. I do not have, I got to be the one doing it. There needs to be young folk learning what I'm doing, because they're probably going to do it better in a couple of years, but I need to be able to pass on the information and the know-how as opposed to hoarding it for myself as if I'm afraid of losing my positionality. And so that's one thing that I really am focusing on, as well as building up generational wealth. Blessed to have parents who are both employed, you know what I'm saying? And so I want to keep it that way for my children, whoever they're going to be, but also really creating, I'm trying to get to this paper, yo, and funnel it into Wall Block so we can keep funding programs at schools, and, you know, help my family out, help my neighborhood out, and not have to ask the city of Seattle or King County, or to be honest, not have to ask anybody for the money, but to be able to generate that myself so that we can teach other people how to do that, especially in such a city like this that is just literally bursting at the seams with wealth, but disproportionate distribution of it.
Beautiful, thank you. Wow, okay, I'm excited for 2019 for you. Yeah. Gregory, how about yourself?
Well, the first thing I say is, who's his parents? I want to know that. Well, I came into 2019 with a very specific interest, and picking up from what Jerrell's talked about, neighborhood empowerment. And harnessing all of the work that we do as an organization, Rainier Beach Action Coalition, as stewards of the neighborhood plan, harnessing all that we do as kind of an outreach mechanism to the neighborhood so that then creates a pathway for them to come back into participating in the activity. But I got to tell you, I got knocked in the head just 5 days ago as a result of some conversation, not literally knocked in the head, but figuratively, as a result of conversations with some young people. You know, we're talking about getting them involved in open space, land use, transportation, public safety. Sitting there talking about opportunities for them to have a voice in those areas of what's going on in the Rainier Beach neighborhood. Excited about it, organization crafted around it. One of the young persons said in the midst of that though was, well, I just paid my car note and I don't have money at the end of my month to cover food, lights, or the heating bill. And that just struck me like a ton of bricks. So here we are talking about these lofty involvements, important, critical to the lifeblood of that neighborhood. But here we have young people in front of us who need food to eat, need nutrition. So one of the things that we are doing now is recalibrating our organizational thrust so that we can first address those felt needs of the young people that we're talking about getting into these leadership positions. It is very difficult for us to expect them to be at the table, testifying, talking to city council members, talking to developers, and struggling with not really having to eat, or struggling with some mental health concerns. Trauma is one of the greatest challenges that we have in our neighborhood, be it because of long-term poverty, be it because of oppression, be it because of the random occurrences of violence, needing to address the felt needs of the folks. Now, we may not be the ones delivering all of those services. We want to create pathways through our monitoring work in the neighborhood, supporting work in the neighborhood, and leading some things. But we want to be able to get those felt needs addressed first. So what that means is we have this notion called a food innovation district and a food innovation center, where what we did was change the land use zoning of the properties around the light rail station in Rainier Beach, and we made it possible for any development to happen for the ground floor not to be retail, but to be community benefit. Talking about childcare, we're talking about commercial kitchens, we're talking about learning environments and learning spaces. And the hope is to use food as a way to bring communities together in the neighborhood, to create jobs, to create opportunities, and to build relationships. And so through that kind of knock in the head, it kind of recalibrated in the last week about what we're going to be doing in 2019. And so we're excited about it, and we want y'all to jump on the train and see what we're doing.
Yeah, if folks wanted to jump on the train, if folks wanted to support and get involved in either of your projects, how would they do that?
Well, I will say literally you can jump on the train from right here and get off at the Rainier Beach Light Rail Station, and you would trip and fall into our building and our office because we're right across the street from the light rail station. We wanted to be where the change was happening the fastest in the neighborhood, so that as these people who came into the neighborhood with their own aspirations, that we can be right there and telling them what the community aspirations are. So naturally you can go to the website, rbcoalition.org. And of course, we are on Twitter at Rainier Beach, and also on Facebook, Rainier Beach Action Coalition. And so those are ways that folks can find out about us and get involved.
Thank you. And Jerrell?
For us, www.wa-bloc.org, wabloc.org. You know, I'm very particular about who I invite into our space because I work at a high school, and just because you want to help kids doesn't mean that you should. You know, you gotta go through a background check before I can let you into my after-school homework center, and so. But holler at me on email as well. I'm Jerrell at wabloc.org, and I can connect you with our coordinators that we are always looking for people to support by bringing food into our homework center, after-school homework center. Rainier Beach is a school that can also definitely use the support, and I think just elevating the stories. I think watching how you talk about a neighborhood that you don't know about, that's how you can help very tangibly. Don't talk about South Seattle if you don't live there and you don't know what the truth about it is. And come check us out. We host an event called the Block Party, March 27th. That's an event that's not necessarily open to the public, but we're receiving donations because we've been operating this event the last 4 years with no budget, which means that we're bringing in over 40, 50 workshops, having artists and organizations hosting spaces, and they've been donating their time. And I know personally I would like to transition to being able to compensate people for that time, especially because they're people from our neighborhood, understanding that people are willing to give their time for free, but also knowing that it is powerful to at least offer some sort of honorarium for their time, especially folks that are returners. Yeah, there's a couple of ways, but I'll stick with those for now. Oh yeah, and go listen to my music. It'll change your life.
Thank you, thank you. There's some interesting themes there, Gregory. I hear. I mean, I think in both of your narratives, right? There's around innovation and change, or just at the very much there. And Gregory, I hear you going deeper with the community and searching for nourishment and what's going to feed the inside. And Jerrell, I hear you doing going expanding, and bringing new resources and expanding the ideas of what can be resources within the community. So I think that's just beautiful, the combination of the two. Yeah, thank you so much for offering that. Because we have two guest speakers today, we thought that we would switch up the format a little bit. And so rather than me asking all the questions, what we had done was we had asked Jerrell and Gregory to trade some questions of their own to one another. And so we're going to switch to that kind of portion. So I won't be asking the questions. I'm just going to be here listening and enjoying. But you have questions that you're going to ask each other. And so I'll turn it over to you both.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you very much.
Can I ask a question first?
No, I'm the father, so I'll go first. Yeah. So answer this for me, Jerrell. What value or skill did you learn at home that you use today?
I mean, just one? I'd say just one. I think it's just one. I'll say communication. And I'll say that kind of broadly, but there's definitely specific examples. I remember when I would come home and I remember a specific situation. I was taking calculus. I was taking pre-calculus. I went from sophomore to junior year and like switched up all my classes and took a bunch of honors classes. And so I essentially went from geometry to pre-calc. And all the people that had previously, I would have been in class with the previous year, they took trigonometry. And if you're a mathematician in any sort, you know that trig is like the basic element of pre-calculus. And so skipping trigonometry and going straight to pre-calculus, I struggled with that transition. And I remember my dad buying this DVD called Calculus Made Simple. And it was Sunday nights. He said he made an agenda. He forcibly passed that lesson on to me, and I would have to have things laid out. I remember in the summer times I would have to create a layout of my summer schedule with the blocks. Okay, I'm gonna be working here. I'm gonna be basketball workouts here and reading this time. So that element of communication and just communicating with each other about how we can support each other. I think that's one thing. But then also witnessing how my mom and my dad, how y'all interacted with each other was something that definitely has inspired not only my romantic relationships, but I think all of my relationships, and especially with women and non-men, is just the tenderness of communication. I cannot recall a time where like you raised your voice or mom had to raise her voice or there was, I was like, oh, whoa, like I don't remember any of those times, and so I just think that loving communication, but at the same time, I definitely got reprimanded, and I remember those times, and even the communication of, you want to be here for that? Just the transparent communication, I think, has really helped me to be a magnificent communicator to a point where I'm comfortable enough in myself where you can just plop me in the middle of, I don't know, Guatemala, and language barrier, I can find my way around. And I think that Kyla would probably echo a similar notion of communication being important and just the different varieties of how we communicate with each other, I think has also elevated my emotional intelligence. And so I'll stick with that one. I'll say communication.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point because one of the things that you all have learned to value in your own right is the attaining another language, and you're being able to speak fluently in Spanish. Kyla being able to speak Japanese is just a demonstration of the importance of that. So yeah, good word.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so with that said, then when I was a kid, what was the element of leadership that you wanted to pass on most to me?
Yeah, I'll start with the element of leadership that my parents passed on to me that I in turn made sure that I passed on to you, and that was really knowledge of self, knowledge of your culture, knowledge of yourself as a person of faith, because it was going to be that knowledge that was going to allow you to overcome the challenges that you would have. I think about terms that come out of our faith tradition. We're talking about love, talking about grace. To have those things in your heart and those things being the way that you lead is one of the lessons that we wanted to make sure that you had. In terms of culture, knowing from whence you come, knowing the people who created the cultural realities of our culture, knowing who they are, because you're going to be and have and will face tough times, and it's going to be really important that you know that and know that those folks overcame much more, if as much more than you have, and knowing that will allow you to continue to pursue, persevere, and to overcome. So really knowledge of self, your cultural grounding, your grounding in faith, and the principles that are associated with those things.
Thank you. I think that I was able to pick up on those and probably, I think I could recognize it as I was coming up, but I think definitely in my adulthood, I've been able to look back, and especially as I work with young people, thinking about the leadership qualities I want to instill in them, I think are also very similar. One of the things that I hone in on as an educator is, and I think that's a cultural thing as well, is really emphasizing the definition of education, which it being more about extracting brilliance that's already within, as opposed to, filling up an empty vessel. And I think that's what knowledge of self is. Education, whether we're talking about in a classroom, at a Kwanzaa meeting, or at a church, or on the street, is a continued learning of self. And so I definitely think that I was able to pick up on those, and they're continual journeys, but I receive it.
So let me ask this. What was the one or two little things we did as you were growing up that had the most influence on you as a person? You mentioned a few things, but there's something else that kind of stands out.
Can you ask it again?
Yeah, what was one or two little things that we did as you were growing up that had the most influence on you as a person?
Okay. I'm purposefully shouting out my mom and sister because they're not up here, but my relationship with my dad is not a full, it's not a full link without them in the picture, because our four unit was very, very tight knit. And I'll say creating or leaving time for me and my sister to spend time together. I think the way that y'all gave space for that relationship to foster was very, it was mad influential on me. I mean, entrusting her with, being able to take care of me, feed me and get me from school to home and out in the world safely. Trusting her for that, but then also raising her up to be able to do that. So, I remember days, Kyla cooking for me, helping me with my homework, us just hanging out, going by to Seattle. These are things that will forever be memories for me. As a child, you're not thinking oh, mom and dad are creating time for me and Kyla to hang out. Nah, it's just kind of, it felt so natural. And now I look back and I'm like, well, me and Kyla spent a lot of time together. And we were able to build such a strong relationship and bond that I have to assume there was some intentionality on the parents' part to let that bond foster and to feed that. And then even when we had our few conflicts that we can remember, the way we went about addressing those. And I will say conflict, addressing conflict, and conflict resolution. I for a while, when you're little, you gotta get, don't spare the rod. But at the same time, I remember your intentionality when I was being admonished or reprimanded. And it's not like there's a whole bunch of times, I wasn't that out of pocket. But I remember what frustrated me was the lectures. I just didn't like the lectures. It just it made me shrink inside because I felt I got disappointed, and it was almost like the disappointment was worse than, that was the consequence. It was oh man, Pops is mad at me, Mom's mad. That's what, and so I think conflict resolution and just the intention behind, as you mentioned, faith and grace. So the extension of grace. I think that especially in this generation, we talk about calling in versus calling out. And to be straight up, I think calling in is some stuff that some people want to kind of displace themselves from being held accountable. So I don't use that language of we gotta call them in. Nah, call people out. They need that. But having a place, having open arms for them to come back into, I think is what is important. And we see in this generation, there's a lot of you get blasted on Twitter, you get blasted in public, and then you excommunicated. And it's well, how they gonna grow? If they don't got a home to come back to? And so when it comes to conflict resolution and teaching us that, and instilling grace in the teaching, when you're out of pocket, but still having, arms come back in, a kiss on the forehead, a hug. Like you still gonna be able to eat dinner, you know what I'm saying? I think that were unconscious lessons that manifested in my psyche and my spirit. And with that said, and we have these kind of conversations a lot around my generation and the generation that's younger, because we work with young folk. And so what do you think is a lesson that is been the hardest for my generation to learn? Or what is a lesson that my generation has still maybe yet to learn or should learn?
I like the question because now it allows me to just kind of get into the, no. One of the things that I'll say to start that is that your generation understands the power it has in the voice that it has. And that what we need to, as a generation, is to accept that power. And in fact, what we need to do is accept the rage that tends to come with it. Because after all, when you look at the landscape and where we are in 2019 compared to where we might have been 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you got every reason to be enraged about the fact that change does not happen in the way that we feel that it should. One of the things that I share with you is we're in the moment of the greatest protest movement that this country has ever seen. And that protest movement is the backlash against social justice and against equity. So you have every reason to be enraged when you see that as the reality. The hardest lesson, though, is once you cut me with the word, you got to recognize that I got to heal before you cut me again. Especially when you're cutting deep, it takes more time for me to heal. So as sure as you state truth to me, I refer to that as that deep cut, that before you come at me with another truth, let me heal first. Otherwise, I don't hear the second one, I don't hear the third one, and I'm retrenching. So I use that stark kind of example as a way to, and so I think that's the hardest lesson, that we can only take so many deep cuts and hear and be able to respond and be able to move in lockstep with you. So that would be how I would kind of describe it and speak to it.
I received that. Yeah, I received that. Because you know me, you know. Yeah, but no, I think that's a good point, because we talk about like this generation of which I love, and I really think about the upcoming generation, and especially how the cell phones technology will undoubtedly create. I mean, it's just going to continue to expand the gap, the generational gap, even from my generation that I wasn't born with cell phones being a reality. But there's a generation like my godson right now who was born 3 years ago. He was born with a phone in his hand. You know what I'm saying? And that undoubtedly in 20 years will, even though I know what phones are, I can navigate an iPhone, they are going to have a very different experience. And I got to say, this one thing that I've really appreciated about our relationship as we've grown to have not just a father and son, but a working relationship, is your man, you one of the very few OGs that really, really rock with us. And I think that I echo that from a lot of people that I organize with, that say the same thing, that like, yo, Jerrell, your pop's like really, like, he's one of the people that we will support and like rock with, you know? I wonder in the same way, I take that constructive critique and criticism of how our generation needs to be able to learn how to heal. And I think that that's part of the problem, is that maybe we haven't learned how to heal. And so when we, it's almost, it's pugnacious in the same way, like you hit me, okay, I got to hit you, but I don't know how to like heal you. I don't know if our generation, and I can't speak just for myself, but has really learned the depth of what it takes to stitch a wound up. But in that same way that I am going to pass that lesson on to my generation, and folks younger than me, I know that you feel a charge to pass what I just said on to your generation of, well, you know, y'all got to recognize their power, and you also got to apologize for when you did them wrong. In the same way, like we're taught to acknowledge when we're wrong. I know that's one frustration I've had with some elders is that it seems like they want to sweep wrongdoing us under the rug, and that I'm out of pocket for calling it out, as if I'm not bleeding too. And so I appreciate you for really supporting my ideas, and I see you doing that with other young folk that are younger than me as well.
There's another question I want to put out to you. How do you decide when to negotiate and when to leave the table? Given all that we just said about some of them hardest lessons your generation has to learn.
Yeah. Negotiate and when to leave the table. That's something that I'm really still wrestling with, really. Being a part of the People's Party and really learning the ins and outs of what this political system is in the United States. And I'm about to go way there, y'all. Just like heads up, I'm about to take it all the way there. Really learning the ins and outs of what two-party, capitalistic, patriarchal, sexist, transphobic, ageist, there's all these isms that are inherent in, and I'm speaking specifically about the political system. I'm having a real hard time figuring out where I'm supposed to negotiate, especially being black, because it seems like every time we negotiate, we end up back in some chains. And so I think about, earlier today I was speaking at a high school, and you know they tasked me with elevating MLK. And I'm like, as much as we want to elevate him, look at all the people that came after him that undid the dream. It's like we tied the shoe and you just undid it, you know? And then people get mad about us complaining. And so I think that I'm definitely in a process of learning when to negotiate, because sometimes I really want to have that Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and I'm like, there's no negotiating here. But then I also recognize from because I mean, and that's some, I wouldn't say it's idealistic, but maybe it's just like what they call like radical, which I'm like, cool. Like, I don't see that as an insult. Like anything, I'm like, right. She called me a rebel, be free. Cool, you know? But at the same time, knowing that change doesn't really manifest overnight. At least we haven't seen it. I think it could, to be 100. I think it could. I think that we confuse ourselves by saying it can't. I think in relationships, I think and as well as these spaces of organizing, my time is energy, and my energy is limited. And I think that I'd have to learn when to step back from the table and negotiate when it feels like my energy is not being replenished at a fast enough pace to keep me at the table. And when I feel like, like I keep coming back to this table, but it feels like I'm losing a little bit of percentage every time I come back to the table. And it's like, we got to recalibrate this. We got to have a conversation about what this really means, you know? And so that's something that I think as a 26-year-old, I'm really having to wrestle with and learn about what it means to negotiate. And that's both holding the line and somewhat, you know, like I think a righteous adamantness, a righteous stagnance, but at the same time understanding, well, how are we gonna feed people if we don't have a conversation with, you know, Seattle Public Schools? You know, how am I gonna do restorative justice if I don't have a funding source with King County? And so those are things that I wrestle with. And would you want to answer that question? No, I'm going to ask you something different.
No, you can go ahead. I will say though, one of the things that creates that we create an even higher burden on that particular question is something that I've been sharing lately, is this idea of how do we hold people accountable but still stay in unity with them? And shouldn't we be able to hold people accountable and still have unity? And that's one of the challenges that we face. So when it comes to negotiating, you know, there are a lot of folks who aren't of that thought. And as soon as you hold accountable, it's taken personal, they get on the defensive. But then, you know, this notion about still being able to stay in unity, you know, isn't received. So yeah, that just kind of adds the additional burden to that expectation. But you know, go ahead.
I received that. I received that. Yo, this is like I have a heavy topic, low key, by the way. Just like letting y'all know, just like go beyond all this stuff. Okay, switching gears a little bit. I know this is a weird question for folk like you and I, and our family, who we're not necessarily like folk that like, we don't brag. You know, we don't gotta tell people like, oh, here's what we do. You know, yeah, I'm proud of myself for this. Like, we don't do that because we elevate each other enough. But what would you say is, and I know it's probably hard to nail it down to one, so maybe like a couple, if you can, of what you consider your greatest professional achievements?
Greatest professional achievement. I will call a recent ultimate win one of them, and it's in relationship to the organizing that we were able to begin in 2010 that resulted in a win in the city of Seattle when the mayor decided to make sure that every high school student got free Orca cards. As you know, we started the Transit Justice Youth Project 2010. Back then we were Rainier Beach Community Empowerment Coalition, and we partnered with Puget Sound Sage, and we got young people together to look at the transportation issues going on in our neighborhood. And one of the things that they did was they found out that in order to get a free Orca card, you had to live 2 miles away from your school. And they were talking about daily being tardy because they had to do that walk, and what kind of sense did that make? And so then what wound up happening based on that bit of strategy and leadership is Wall Block picked it up, or young people picked it up, and you took it to the next level. You got out on the streets. You all, talking about Sister Ifra, Sister Miriam, many more, got out on the street, and you marched from the Seattle Public Schools down to the City Hall as part of the Freedom School. And at that point, the City Council picked up on it, and they allocated $1 million. And then, as it turns out, the mayor picked up on it and made every student able to receive a free Orca card. So I would consider that an accomplishment, but I think the greater accomplishment was that we were empowering young people to be able to do that. Young people to be able to own that and to see that element, and we're going to ride that on forward, and as it relates to public safety. As you know, we got young people doing corner greeter program, rotating between 5 locations on a weekly basis throughout the neighborhood. And one of the things that they were able to do through that work, of course with the help of others, is to reduce the number of incidents that contribute to youth crime by 30% over the last 4 or 5 years. So it is one thing having the wins in terms of policy and systems change, but the key for me is having young people involved in that, critical, central to that work. So.
Okay, so with that said then, how do you know when you're making progress? Because a lot of them say movement, but movement, I mean, atoms move, you know?
Right.
How do you know when you're making progress?
Well, I think I'll have to say the same thing. When young people are in it, that's the demonstration of project. Because we can get grown folks to do things, and then when they tired, they sit down and things move by. But when we can get young people in it, I think that's really critical to knowing when your organizing is taking effect and is being successful. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you both.
Okay, but we have a question that I'm just going to play the recording for you all.
Hi, Gregory. Hi, Jerrell. My name is Mozart. My question is a personal one. So when I moved to Seattle in 2015, you were one of the first two people that I met from the South End, and you really received me with open arms, got to know me, listened to my story. And so I'm curious, for suggestions, because I remember, how concerned I was as someone from another city, how I could make sure that I was being respectful of people who have been doing the work every single day. What is your recommendation, and what tips would you have for people who are new to the South End, for people who are new to a community, new to a city, in terms of how they can walk alongside those folks, whether they belong to that community or not, and how they can be in deep solidarity in ways that aren't disrespectful and in ways that kind of honor relationship. Thank you so much for being here, and I really appreciate, and I'm excited to hear the answer to your question. Answer to my question. All right.
Let you go.
Yeah, because he ain't really from South End like I am. I'm born and raised. No, really, me and my, first generation Seattleites. And I remember Mo because 21 Progress, back when it was like Mozart, like just Mozart. We at Wall Block, we partnered with him on a project called Viking Visionaries, in which he would come in once or twice a week, and we had a group of young people in which Mozart would lead a basically like a workshop around, and at the time, in 2015 was when this term social justice, I feel like really started to like hit the wave. And so I don't even remember if we even used that term, but we would have conversations about, I just remember we were talking about like rap and how, and Meek Mill versus Drake, or this person versus this person, but we were really dissecting critical thinking practices out of the young folk, but using contemporary issues that were relevant to them. As well, one of the things I remember, like Mo was always like bringing food. He would always bring food consistently. And I think the authenticity and of actually following leadership. Like I know Mo is my elder, and I first met him through like the arts. When I first met him was like hearing him spit poetry and being a poet as well. That was actually how I first like tapped in with him, and then us connecting through organizing. But what my biggest frustration is for, and it's not just white folks, but it's folks that come into a neighborhood like knowingly gentrifying. Like, first of all, don't like knowingly gentrify and be like, I'm sorry. Like, nah, you're not, because you're spending $5K a month for your house. You're not sorry, but they come in and they want to lead. They want to lead. And that's my biggest, that will always be my biggest frustration. You can't acknowledge that there's already, to me, if you're stepping into a new space and you want to be the leader, whether or not you're saying it explicitly, you're explicitly showing that you do not believe those people have the ability to lead themselves. Or you arrogant. And I know Mo to be a very humble person, and that's not how, especially hooping with him, I know he's a very humble person. But coming in and being willing to follow the leadership of folks who have already been at that table, as opposed to feeling like, okay, like give me the rock, but understanding that and knowing your role and being willing to learn.
I had a chance to talk to some graduate students at Antioch College, and most of them were white, from out of town, and they asked that question, how do we come into a community when we're not going to be there long, or how do we come into a community when we're new and we don't know the community? So there's a different answer to that question based on who the folks are. So the answer that I would give to say white folk, you got to be willing to take your lumps. You can't come in and try to claim some space or have a voice and not be willing to take some hits. And after that, keep engaged, not jet. Part of it is out of imagining the lumps we've had to take to get it to the table in the fashion that we're at the table. And imagine somebody who wants to come in and now all of a sudden have a voice and not be willing to take lumps. It's just not gonna play. For Mozart, I do think he proceeded in a proper fashion, and so the answer would be because the first time I met him, I knew him because of Sharon Maeda. And so when you talk about coming into our community, it's important that you do have someone who has some credibility helping pave the way for you to come into the community. You can't come in as a lone ranger on a horse trying to, no, you got to come with someone with some credibility if you want to have some space. And then as Jerrell said though, when you come, observe. Observe. Don't come in with your own idea. Take an idea that's offered and try to make it a better idea. You know, don't discount an idea that someone says because you think you got a better one. Take what's already given you and then try to make that one a better idea. I think it probably can go without being said that we do need to see you in the neighborhood. We see you in Safeway. Lord knows we got to wait a long time in them lines. We might as well chop it up while we're doing that. But we do have to see you in critical spaces, engaging the people in a meaningful way, authentic way, as opposed to not, and then someone expecting that they're going to, get a free pass and be able to lead. Got to see you there.
Mm-hmm. Can I add something? I want to add one more thing, and I get super radical, and I'm so serious though. In a space like Seattle, where we got now, from 2013 to now, the homeless population has doubled, factually has doubled. And a majority of that population is actually south of the International District, where most of the resources are north of the International District. I say, offer your space. I'm so serious. If you living in Tupac has a quote where he talks about how you living in a mansion with six rooms and you're using one room. That means you got 5 spaces that people that are on the street, up the street, could be. And if that's not something you're willing to do, I think I really think that makes me question your validity of being here. Are you willing to offer space, knowing that people in the neighborhood, from the neighborhood, don't have space? He talked about the human resource, the human development. People in the South End have not been proportionally developed as our neighborhood is being developed. The disproportionality has created just an exponentially uneven connection. Are you willing to offer space so that people can stay in their neighborhood and serve their neighborhood, as opposed to move the Federal Way and serve the South End?
What words of wisdom, what wisdom literature do you think would benefit us as we depart here and just kind of move on rest of our lives?
Mm-hmm. I want to pull something from Ptah Hotep, because I was reading him earlier today. But no, I'm gonna try to keep it simple, because there's a bunch of things fluttering in my mind. I'll say two things. To a great mind, nothing is small. To a great mind, nothing is small. And I'll say harmony needs 3 different notes. In order for something to be in harmony, you have to have multiple notes. It can't be all in the same key, all in the same note, or else it's monotonous. And in order for us to have harmony, a city like Seattle is so diverse. In order for it to sound good and be good, those notes have to be on the same key and together, because otherwise it's cacophonous, which I think is what it is. But in order for it to be harmony, those notes do have to be on the same key, but they also necessarily have to be different. What would you offer?
Well, being steeped in culture, I always got to kind of fall back on wisdom literature and some proverbs from our cultural origin, and I'm going to probably offer a couple. One, my wife just loves, Sean, she just loves to hear. And it goes like this: think not of yourself, think about those who have come before you, our elders. Think not of yourself, think about those who have yet to come, our children. And in doing this, you're thinking about yourself. Okay. The other one that I would offer is just because a log is in the river a long time does not make it an alligator. And I offer that up because of our work in what is referred to in the society as marginalized communities. We are not in fact marginalized. We are in fact compressed together, and the talent exists there, and that's why we are able to overcome, because we are so compressed. But what others might see as an alligator in the river, South End, young black people, might in fact be a log that allows them to get across the river. So when we say, even though a log is in the river for a long time, does not make it an alligator.
Beautiful.
That was good.
Gregory and Jerrell, thank you so much for being with us this evening. Two storytellers. This is really rare. We don't have two incredible. We usually have one incredible individual, right? But there's two here, and so I just really, really appreciate you. And I think just absolutely this dynamic in terms of, I think that the leadership stories that both of you shared, there is so much interconnectedness, and the work that you're doing today, presently, similar, and sharing your wisdom with us, how you got into leadership, how you're in the spots that you're in today. Very, very grateful to be able to witness these stories, to hear them, to share them. And we'll be sharing this video, with other folks as well. And so really, really excited to just get these words out. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate the
Thank you
opportunity.
very much.
Shout out to moms and sis in the house. Camera got to get a flick of them.
We just want to invite you all to our very last event that will be happening on January 30th. So this is a 4-part series. This is the third event. We have one last one to do. Really excited to kind of close with you all, whether you've attended one event or many. And with that, really just want to express so much gratitude. We've never done an event format like this, so I really appreciate patience and just walking through us with this process.
Yeah.
There was so much that really resonated from the lessons that you had shared, that you had learned, that you're learning, that you're practicing, and there was really this intentionality around how do you want to pass that on? What do you want to create each day, and really how do we close with so many quotes that as you were speaking, we're writing down as just strong, powerful words that very much resemble, I think, the values that we're hoping to instill here at 21 Progress. As we think about leadership, Jerrell, something that you said that just stuck with me so much was around this concept around not having founders syndrome, right? That as we create, that it is so much so about replicating. How do we multiply the number of people that are able to do good work in our community? And how do we continue to pass that on, and that we don't own something, right? And that there's something much larger than that. And when you spoke about grace, love, faith, and really leading, I think from a place that is very much rooted in community and around elevating each other, I just really want to acknowledge you all taking time to ask one another questions, whether they're normal in like your family dynamic or not. They're very much questions that we ask ourselves each and every day here.
Yeah.
And so
Good word.
it's very special to have that. Yeah, and just want to end with saying thank you.
Right. You're welcome.
Ashe.
Pleasure. Yeah.
Blessings.